Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
I've been going out with a girl, her name is Julie, but last night she said to me when we were watching telly.
Yeah. Hello, Ed.
No problem.
Hiya.
Hello there.
You think we should do absolutely nothing. Tell me why.
Absolutely. We are not the fighting force we used to be. We are nearly bankrupt as a country. We're not even filling the craters in our roads. I'm not going to call them potholes. I'm now going to call them craters
I know.
in our roads. And there's people waiting on the NHS, and we just haven't got the money. And they want to start throwing missiles probably and taking in their refugees. It's absolutely ludicrous.
I think you need to get in context where, first of all, the economy is going to be successful if we trade, and Brexit is the wrong way to go. As for war, in terms of we working as United Nations and standing up United Nations, we can contain crises. And by containing crises, we prevent it spreading, and then it becomes a problem. They look at the refugee crisis. We did not step in, and the refugee crisis got conflagrated by Russia stepping in, and Russia was more than happy to conflagrate it and potentially cause, problems in Europe. So by not doing anything, we've actually done ourselves significantly more harm.
Ed?
I don't see how you work that out, really, to be honest.
I just told you. Please counter any of the points.
Why should we have to poke our nose in everything America wants to do?
It's not America. It's about containing. If we do not contain, we risk conflagration. You saw the refugee crisis. Were you happy about that? Nobody was. We chose to do nothing. We got a refugee crisis. Russia at the moment is really pushing the boundaries. It's proxy wars are all over the place, and it sees us as a threat because we're wealthy and it's poorer, and this risks fragmenting Russia. Now, if we do nothing, we risk seeing more and more of these proxy wars and it escalating. We need to stand up for ourselves. If we don't stand up for ourselves, we risk getting in a much worse position.
I'm sure Russia and President Putin are shaking in their boots over us. I really do.
But we wouldn't be acting on our own, Ed, if we act at all militarily.
No. I can tell you now, Russia isn't bothered about anybody. I can honestly say that.
It's about standing up for yourself. You just have to stand up. If you get pushed, you just stand up and say, no, we aren't going to go to war with Russia. But if we get pushed around, then it could go to war. We have to prevent it getting to that point by standing up for ourselves. If a bully's pushing you around, you stand up and say, no. Then you don't get into a fight. But if you start, cowering, then eventually it will go to war. You need to stand up for yourself, and you need to stand together.
So you don't think then if we go on America's side then and start war against Assad?
Nobody's starting a war against.
You don't think, or even we take him out, or we try to take him out. You think Russia's going to sit by and just?
No, I'm saying we need to get into negotiations, and the only way to do that is to have a foot in the game. And if we get negotiations by, first of all, ruling out chemical weapons, which you must agree with, then we are in a position to negotiate and say, look, we want peace. We want to end this bloodbath, because that's what Russia's got at the moment, a bloodbath.
I'm sorry,
you can't support that.
Do you really think these people like Mad Assad, right, are in for negotiations? Do you really think that?
The only way to deal with these people is with strength. If you think weakness is going to solve it, you're wrong.
No, I'm not thinking weakness is going to solve it. What I'm saying is fix our own roof first before it starts raining again.
If you ignore it, it will spread. You need to stand up for. If we don't stand up for ourselves, then we look very weak, and that's what the whole U.S. at the moment, with regards to Syria, looks incredibly weak, because we've allowed basically people fighting against what is basically being bombed, nail bombs being dropped on civilian protesters. We've effectively said, you know what, we're not going to do anything.
Ed, are you concerned at all that chemical weapons, the use of chemical weapons, chemical warfare, is being normalised by events in Syria? And think Salisbury. You wouldn't want anything bigger than Salisbury happening on UK soil, would you?
No, I wouldn't. And I think that both of these things are absolutely atrocious. But you've got to try and take out the main cause of it, which is Assad, and they've had plenty of occasions where they could have taken him out. Plenty.
You are right there. We had a good opportunity to stop it right at a specific point with little effort, and we did nothing. And
by take him out, you mean an assassination of him as an individual?
Yeah. Or try and get him out some way or another, and get him in The Hague, get him put in prison for the rest of his life. for the war crimes.
I don't think Russia's going to allow that.
I don't. Well, exactly. Russia's not going to allow it. And do you think?
No.
Do you think America and the UK are going to be able to stand up against Russia as well?
It's only negotiations, and we can do that by making a stand now on chemical weapons, which we need to do anyway.
Ed, you sound like you've thrown the towel in.
I've not thrown the towel in, no, but we're not the fighting nation we used to be. How many troops have they got rid of now? You know?
Yeah, but we wouldn't be acting on our own. And we're talking about a global response to this.
No, I still don't think it's going. I don't know. I don't see why you've got to get other countries involved. You take out the culprit. That's what you do. You take him out.
Well, it's not that simple, is it?
Well, I don't know, but I mean, look at Iraq. Look what happened there. How many troops did we lose there? It's going to end up in conflict somewhere or another. Military conflict. It's got to, if that's the case. If that's what they want. If that's what they're talking about. Getting involved with America. Getting involved with gun-ho America, like we always do, it always ends up in problems and fatalities.
So let America do it. But that's still...
Let America do it.
Let America do it.
If they want to. Yeah.
Let America protect us from chemical warfare. Don't help them.
They've got a much more bigger fighting force than we have.
They do. They've got the biggest. But shouldn't we even morally support that if they are doing something to prevent the spread of chemical warfare?
Morally, yes, but I don't think our troops should go in. I don't think any more of our people should be killed over it.
All right, Ed, thank you. And thanks to Evan as well. Thanks for speaking to each other. That was a great conversation. Sani in St Albans. Hello there.
Oh, hi. First time caller. I've never done this before.
You're very welcome. Thank you for calling.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I feel very strongly about the whole thing. The reason I'm calling, as I said, I've never actually called a radio show before in my life. I just think the whole thing is staged.
What staged?
The whole. I mean, obviously, I'm not saying that people weren't hurt by this chemical attack, but I mean, who's done it? And I just feel the whole thing is staged so that America can intervene and hit the Iranian in Syria, and they're doing it on behalf of Israel. Because I mean, you had a guest yesterday on your show, the Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army.
Yes.
Ex-Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army.
Yes.
And what he alluded to, that they want to take out Iran before they fire their rockets into Israel from all directions. So, they just want an excuse to go in and attack the Iranian in Syria before they attack Israel. So the whole thing is done for.
And does Israel not deserve global protection? If that attack were imminent.
Why it's done?
No, but if that attack were imminent, wouldn't...
In that case, why don't they say it? Why don't they come out and say, instead of making it, find out an excuse like a chemical attack, which we don't know. We don't know who did it. It could be Assad. It could be, it could be anybody. It could be Jaish al-Islam.
Could be the children themselves.
So
They broke into the one remaining local swimming pool in Syria and got the chlorine and killed themselves.
I'm sorry,
But Sani,
I'm making a serious point.
I'm making a serious point as well.
And you're making a stupid point.
I'm making a serious point that why is you? Well, I am actually. Why are you so resistant to the idea that Assad and Russia are the problem here? Why are you so resistant to that?
Yeah. Because we don't have the proof. You
have 7 years of proof, Sani.
And the Americans,
you have 7 years of proof. The Americans haven't been killing Syrians.
In the White House.
The Americans haven't been killing Syrians.
Sorry?
The Americans haven't been killing Syrians.
John Bolton, a known, warmonger and interventionist and a Zionist as well, and they'll do anything to protect Israel.
7 years of war in Syria is about Zionism. Oh, Sani. Thank you for your call. Call again, Sani, in St Albans. It was General Jack Keane he was talking about a moment ago, my guest yesterday, the former Vice Chief of the US Army.
Where we continue to discuss Ealing Council's decision to ban harassment, intimidation and distress from the abortion clinic in their constituency in Ealing, and I kind of I've enjoyed the conversation more than I thought I was going to. The question then becomes, as the last caller suggested, where is the line between, if you like, free speech and things that shouldn't be allowed? And the line Ealing Council have decided is geographical rather than contextual. You can't do it here. Not banning the opinion, not banning the view, not banning the pictures, not banning the pamphlets, whatever it is you do, but you can't do it here. How do you feel about that? And if you've had experience from, I suppose, from either side, actually, of the protest, I'd love to hear from you as well. 0345 6060 973. Liam's in Croydon. Liam, what would you like to say?
Good morning, Mr. O'Brien. First-time caller.
Hello.
Good day. Yeah. Now, I would just like to give an example of what happened recently in Manchester with Manchester Borough Council. They decided to push through some legislation banning protests outside abortion clinics, and at the same time, they disclosed that they had no evidence. I'm simply asking, where's the evidence of harassment and provocation and intimidation outside these clinics?
How hard have you looked?
Well, James, in this day and age where everyone has mobile phones, you know, it would be fairly easy, I feel, to find evidence of harassment.
So do I. So how hard have you looked?
Yeah. Well, I can only speak as a Catholic, and in terms of James.
How does being a Catholic affect your access to the internet or the news?
Well, that's not what I'm stating here. You know, we have
why are you then? So how hard have you looked for evidence?
We have an organisation called SPUC, the Society for the
Protection of Unborn Children. Yes.
Yeah. Now, I know personally members who protest outside these clinics.
Oh, there's your evidence.
From a Catholic point of view, James, there is no harassment, provocation, intimidation.
So
they decide they've got evidence. They need to present us with it.
Have you been there yourself?
At these clinics, no.
Oh. So you just believe them when they tell you that there hasn't been any harassment?
No, I'm looking for evidence.
I mean, I'm asking how hard you've looked. I'm asking how hard you...
With the evidence that there's any harassment, you know, we're talking about a very, very, I think you would agree, a very sensitive subject.
But I don't understand why you've rung me to say that you really want to see some evidence, and then you're kind of admitting that you haven't made any effort at all to find any.
James, I haven't seen evidence.
No, but you haven't looked for any.
These callers have not presented you with any evidence.
They are evidence. Unless you're calling them liars, they are evidence.
Well, let's
the lady in Richmond described what she'd seen with her own eyes, and you've rung in asking for evidence, and I'm asking how hard you've looked for it, and the answer is you haven't looked for it at all, because if you did, you wouldn't be able to ring me up and argue that there wasn't any.
James, you had a caller earlier who said she lived next door to a clinic.
No, she didn't.
Oh, come on.
No, she didn't. She said her doctor's was next door to the clinic. You see, this is what happens when you have a position that you seek to support, but you don't have the facts to support it. She said her doctor's was next door to the clinic, Liam.
It's in the public domain, James, that Manchester City Council agreed they had no evidence, but still...
And I can't wait for you, when we're talking about Manchester City Council, I really look forward to you ringing in, but we're not. We're talking about Ealing, and Heather was talking about Richmond. So I'll ask you again, even though we both know the answer and only one of us is pretending not to understand that. How hard have you looked for the evidence?
James, where is the evidence? Please.
Well, you keep listening, because every caller we've had so far, from Richmond to Belfast, has described the evidence of their own eyes. So for the final time, when you rang in to complain that there wasn't any evidence, can I ask how hard have you looked? Where is the evidence? How hard have you looked, Liam?
So are you saying that Manchester City Council are lying, James? I know we're talking about Richmond. I know we're talking about Ealing. Are you saying they're lying?
I'm not saying anybody's lying. I'm saying that the people ringing me today to describe what they've seen with their own eyes are telling the truth. I've got no reason to doubt it. So there is the evidence.
I'll take your word for that. I'll take their word for it.
Well, then we're all square. That was cool. What a waste of both our time.
Ed in White City is available to speak to us. Hello, Ed. Thanks for calling.
Good morning, or good afternoon, I should say, Sheila. Yeah, my line probably won't be that much better. I'm normally calling you from Hounslow, but today I'm going all the way from White City because I'm in the Hammersmith Hospital having had a heart attack.
Oh dear.
So,
get well.
Yeah. So I'm a person who is usually at the vigil in Ealing, and as soon as I get out of here, I shall be back there. Nothing will stop me, and nothing that Ealing Council has brought in or may yet bring in further will stop me. So that's it. The fight goes on as far as I'm concerned.
A fight? What are you fighting for?
The fight goes on as far as I'm concerned.
And what is? Tell me what the fight is.
Well, the fight against abortion, the fight against unborn children being put to death at Mattock Lane, the fight against Ealing Council, which is, satanically governed. All of those things are a big fight against...
Satanically governed?
Absolutely, yes.
Just because they disagree with you, Ed, you think they're satanic?
Pardon?
Because they disagree with you, you think they're satanic?
No, not because they disagree with me, but because they're evilly motivated. If you look into all that's gone on, I've spoken to some of those councillors who said to me that, they wouldn't be voting in favour of this and that. But when it comes to it, they all vote in unison, and believe you me, they're under a directive.
Ed, thank you for your call. Get well in hospital there in White City. I want to hear from Brendan in Ruislip before we go to the news at 2:30, the news headlines. Hello, Brendan.
Hi there, Sheila. You were saying about rights, balancing rights, but the law doesn't actually make rights, does it? Rights are supposed to be inalienable. No one can... They're not given to us by the law, and they can't be taken away by the law.
But they are given by the law, aren't they?
They're not. They're inalienable. The law cannot give you rights, and no one can give...
It can protect them.
A right. Sorry?
It can protect them.
Yeah, but no one actually has a right to kill another human being. That is like the fundamental basis of human rights. An innocent human being cannot be killed. And so when you're saying balancing rights, what one group of here, you've got one group who are killing innocent human beings, and that is an objective fact. It's not my opinion, it's scientific, objective fact. And you've got another group trying their best to defend, they're responding with their duty.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you know it. I'm sure you know it, Brendan, but I'm saying it because it behoves me to say it, that what you regard as a human life is, and again, you say science, it's an objective fact in science. Plenty of scientists and medics will tell you that life is not a full, viable human life until it can live successfully outside of the mother's womb.
Yeah, but that is, again, it's subjective. Objectively, it is a human life. You're saying, okay, you're saying it can't live, but then, lots of people can't live with...
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying I've said before on air, my own personal view on abortion is a very small c conservative one for myself, but I don't believe that there shouldn't be access for women who want abortion or who want to discuss it. I don't think the heavy hand of the state is the right way to go with abortion. But for me, it is human life. But Brendan,
surely we have to protect human life, Sheila. This is a really bad direction.
Well, Ireland.
Once we give the state the power to define who is a human being and who isn't, then we are going down a really, really dangerous road.
Well, in Britain, we don't equate the life of the mother with the child, do we? Or the mother with the fetus, as the lingo would go. But that battle, that argument is being waged in Ireland right now, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But it's as you say there in Britain. But we shouldn't get away from like objective facts. That we can't redefine what reality is. It's a human being is a human being, and once we start saying that the government or the Irish government or this government or this is like what the Nazis did back in Germany. They say that certain people don't have a right to live, and we really, really, really have to stick with objective truth.
Brendan, thank you very much for your call. I know a lot of you listening to Brendan there will disagree with you, with him about when a fetus becomes a fully viable human life with human rights. But thank you for your call, Brendan. Greg has called on this from Sidcup. Hello, Greg. This being, in case people are just tuning in, this being Ealing Council's decision to provide 100-metre buffer zones around the Mary Stopes abortion clinic. Greg, fire away with your thoughts.
Honestly, I think this is a really bad thing. In the past, certainly in the past sort of 20 years or so, we've had, I think, 6 or 7 young ladies stay with us in our home who, in fact, had gone to the clinics. What they told us was that they had no counselling. It was primarily geared really just to... The assumption really was that they would have abortions. But they stayed with us. Some stayed the whole 8 months or so. Some stayed, only maybe 6 months. But all of them stayed.
And how did this staying with you and presumably your wife come about?
Organisations like the Good Counsel, I think, network was certainly one of them, but several of them. They obviously have a network, and we'd put our names down, and they simply called and said, "Is it possible for us to take a girl or help a girl in this particular?" We have a spare room, and they were able to stay with us, and we could give them the support. We helped them with baby clothes. We helped them with whichever way they really wanted, and they stayed with us. One of the girls, for instance, became pregnant after, I think, a Christmas party. She didn't want her parents to know. She didn't want friends and colleagues to know. And so she stayed with us. Very happy. We, in fact, became the godparents of the child.
But presumably her parents and friends found out eventually, did they?
I don't know. I know she, but the one I'm thinking of, had a child adopted immediately at birth. So we're basically in London, and I think her parents were up north. But no, and it just seems to me, what Claire actually said is correct. They've actually helped several hundred, probably 500-600 girls over the years. And the reality now is that won't be an opportunity for any of these girls, because... Well,
they will. They're still there. They're just not so close to the front door.
Sure, but the reality is that they're 100. I don't know the situation there.
It's 100 meters.
It's much more difficult now. You can't even give if you could give a leaflet out, there's a telephone number, and they no doubt people do actually phone up and say, "Look, this is my situation. Can you help me?"
What about the point that my guest from Sister Supporter made when she said, if organisations like the Good Counsel Network became properly, officially accredited as a source of pregnancy and abortion advice,
they are officially accredited in the same way. I mean, they have trained counsellors. I'm not sure.
I just mean in terms of, for example, when I don't know whether you heard my call just a moment ago from Kate, when she went to her GP, if her GP isn't equipped to give advice one way or another, then wouldn't it be great if the GP could say, well, look, if you're certain you want an abortion, contact the Mary Stopes Clinic in Ealing. If not, this organisation, the Good Counsel Network, accredited, safe people that, are recognised by the government as a good organisation, then you might want to go to them for other advice. And not just those two. I mean, whatever advice a person needs, whatever...
I agree with you. It would be great if that was... But unfortunately...
But why the need to stand on a pavement? A pavement isn't the place to discuss this, is it?
Well, I agree with you, but at the same time, there is no mechanism in place currently for women to actually... For instance, a doctor will not... the doctors primarily just focus on the abortion clinics. You're thinking of having abortion, go and speak to the abortion clinics. Now, the abortion clinics, you must remember, are paid for each abortion they have. So they have...
I think you do a disservice to many GPs, maybe not all, but to many GPs, to think that they would just blithely say, no discussion, go and have an abortion.
Well, to some degree, I do know that. I'm not saying that they would do that, but they would certainly have a conversation with the girl. She says, I'm thinking of having an abortion. They will provide them with materials. But if she says, I'm not sure, they would not directly send them to, let's say, the Good Counsel or other networks.
No, but they would. But they would counsel them themselves or send them to counsellors.
No, as you quite rightly said, they've got 3 minutes, 5 minutes. They haven't got really the time. And I know quite a number of GPs who actually refuse to participate in the whole abortion thing. It is very, very difficult. I think the government does need to sort of say, look, they are, or at least provide balanced resources.
Yes, but advice shouldn't be given on the pavement, should it, about something as serious as this? I think that's the weak spot for organisations like the Good Counsel Network. It seems to me that the advice is given on the street or offered on the street. You know, that there are ways and means of dealing with people's medical questions and fears. And I'm not sure leaflets on a pavement is the way forward, whether it's about abortion or anything else. Greg, thank you very much for your call, Greg in Sidcup. Confirmed earlier British findings that the Salisbury nerve agent was from the Russian Novichok class of nerve agent. The OPCW didn't say where the nerve agent was manufactured or when, but they do note in their report its high purity. Now, there is a full summary, a full report that is classified, so we won't get to see all of that, but there is a summary as well. So I'll throughout the hour, I'll give you potted excerpts from that, sorry, that I've just seen. I've just started to read. Alex has called from Camden, and Jay in Wembley on the question of a military response in Syria. Hello, Alex.
Hi, morning, afternoon, actually, Sheila. How are you?
I'm okay. A bit nervous, Alex.
I've listened to you for a couple of days, and you've been a bit hawkish on this whole military action thing. And I'm wondering, it's probably some of the pictures you've seen coming out of Syria. I mean, some of the pictures on CNN over the last few years have been absolutely horrendous.
It's not really, to be honest. The picture. It's not the last 2 days. I think we've been feeble on Syria, to be honest, and I've thought that for a long time.
But where's that coming from, Sheila? It seems to be coming from an expectation that you feel us here in the UK, who are pretty much struggling with everything, into our taxes, our NHS, all of our services, are the policemen of the world, and it's our job to go out on these military adventures. And remember, we've still got troops in Afghanistan, in Iraq.
It isn't
a mess in Libya.
No, it isn't because I think we're the policemen of the world. It's because I think we're citizens of the world. Sorry, Theresa May. I think we're citizens of the world. And when it comes to things like the appalling, and you can throw Yemen at me in a minute, I'm sure you will. But I would include the same with this. When a populace is on the receiving end of what the Syrians have been on the receiving end of from their own government for the last 7 years. I think it behoves the world to respond. When chemical weapons are used, I think it behoves the world to respond. And when chemical weapons are used on the streets of our own country, I think it behoves us to respond.
Yeah, I'm concerned about the linkages you make. For example, I'm not going to include the spying scandal between Britain and Russia in any judgment about Syria.
The spying scandal or the chemical weapons scandal?
Let me make my point, because I just listened to you. The spying scandal. I see Salisbury as a spying scandal. It's between the spy agencies of Britain and Russia. Between them, they're responsible. And I don't think that's not going to inform me, in my opinion, on Syria. Syria is a separate issue. It's a war that's been going on. It's a war that we've been funding.
It's not about Syria. It's about chemical weapons, Alex.
No, let me make my point. Obviously, we know Obama was in. There was a decision by Obama and Putin to make sure that there were no chemical weapons used in Syria, that there was no chemical weapons available around. This goes back to 2012, 2013. The reality is, Sheila, that the Russians and the Syrian army have been successful in driving out militant Islamic forces in Syria. They've been successful. The West, because the West has done is...
Well, so have we, in a different part of Syria.
The West has backed... I don't believe we have. Knowing the power...
But we have.
Well, let me make my point.
Well, you are making lots of points. I'm allowed in, aren't I?
Yeah, but you've had a big monologue, which is full of propaganda.
It wasn't a monologue. It was an answer to Alex, it was not a monologue. It was an answer to a question you put to me.
Okay, so Sheila, can I respond or not?
Yes, please do, but so can I. That's the point I'm making. So can I.
Okay, I'm not going to stop you.
You're trying hard to. You're not going to succeed.
No, I have no intention of even trying. What I'm trying to do is make a point. If you want me to do that, I'll go ahead.
I'm dying for you to do it, but I will. Right, I will interrupt sometimes. So let's make this conversation about Syria. I'm not. Well, so are you, arguably.
I'm trying to get my point.
Go on then. I tell you what. I tell you what. Let's converse your way. Let's converse your way. Have the mic. Have the mic. Go. Have the mic.
I'm patient, Sheila. My point.
Have the mic.
Okay. My point is that what we have here is Western powers, Britain and America. We've been funding groups that we don't really know enough about, and these groups are losing in their battle in Syria. They've been losing for many months. We've had the siege of Aleppo, then that collapsed, and a whole bunch of militants were moved out on buses. We've had other sieges.
Only militants?
And, I'm saying that we've been having a civil war, and the groups we're backing are losing. So the question is, do we now back them with the sort of air power that we saw in Libya, which is what appears to be what some people want to happen? And if you say that you want to do that, then you have to start building a propaganda war. And all the silliness around Russia, I think, is part of building that rather daft propaganda war. And the reality of the matter is that in Syria, whatever way you want to look at it, we've had these chemical weapons incidents that have not been factually documented and proven as to how they've been caused. So we know that if you're in a situation where you are losing and you need to galvanize international opinion, then obviously putting pictures of babies being injured by chemical weapons is a very good way of doing that.
Which you think are fake pictures to you?
The international community...
Do you think they're fake pictures? No, I'm asking you a question, Alex, please. It's a conversation. Do you think they're fake pictures?
I didn't say that.
I'm asking you what do you think they are of?
I'm about to tell you. I think the international community, as in what we say we are the moral West, we have to be more sophisticated than allow ourselves to be manipulated by either party.
What are those pictures of, Alex? You're not answering. What are those pictures of? No, you didn't. You told me what you think about the international community. What do you say those pictures are of?
I don't say they're anything. I don't make judgments without evidence, Sheila, unlike yourself. And I'm not here to be a propaganda mouthpiece on a march to war. I've seen that happen in 2003. And it wasn't we had Colleen Graffrey on every news channel saying how a good idea it was to invade Iraq, that Saddam had gassed his own people. No one ever asked where he got the gas from, obviously because it was the Americans. But it was the same lines that were being trumpeted all the time as to why we should intervene. When it was ISIS, there's the same lines about people being thrown off buildings. I know propaganda, Sheila, when I see propaganda. And the problem is, it's again...
I thought you said you didn't judge evidence. I thought you said you didn't judge things until you had evidence.
Propaganda is statements that are made without proper evidence. When people jump to conclusions...
Well, you've decided without knowing that those pictures are propaganda. I've decided without knowing is that they're a news report from last week.
No, I said that those pictures are not proof and evidence of what has happened. What they are, at the moment, until they are proven, is evidence that something may have happened which needs investigation. And unless you take that kind of forensic approach, we leave ourselves open to head towards a third world war, potentially fought out initially in the Middle East, but having the potential to erupt elsewhere. And a lot of these people sitting in cozy rooms and on radio stations thinking that this will never get to them, I refer them back...
I don't think that at all. Well, it's already here, Salisbury.
No, I'm talking about get to them in the way that we've had to fight for our futures in the Second World War. Many of us don't want that again, Sheila. And this is...
I would have thought none of us do.
Well, no. 70 years odd has let people become complacent and cocky about the dangers and the risks of international conflict. You can never be cocky about these things.
Can I ask you, on the subject of cockiness, what you meant by Russian silliness? Did you mean... You seem to dismiss Russia as a small matter. Did you include in the silliness of our response to Russia their attack on Crimea, their attack on Ukraine ongoing, their attack on various elections ongoing, Salisbury ongoing?
Again, Sheila, you're sounding like a propaganda report. Did you forget when we invaded Afghanistan and Iraq?
No, I'm asking about Russia.
What did the Russians think about that? The French were opposed to the Iraq invasion completely. Britain and America pushed ahead. Does that make Britain and America bad international states for carrying out that war in Iraq, for basically control of the Iraqi oil fields?
So we're as bad as them in our adherence to international law.
We are no better than Russia.
Okay, we're no better than Russia. Alex, I've given you a good 10 minutes. I think we disagree on how a conversation should be conducted, but there you go. You had your time. Thank you for calling LBC. Emma in Bromley, you disagree, don't you?
Yes, I think it comes from an increased knowledge of what Islam actually is. When it's taught at primary school, I've had a conversation with a primary teacher about this. She didn't actually know what Islam actually was.
Who didn't?
The primary school teacher that I was
She
talking
shouldn't
to.
be in the school.
Well, it's how it's taught. It's taught as a benign religion. They're not taught. They're not taught. If you leave Islam, the penalty is death. If you question any aspect of Islam, the penalty is death. They're not taught that there is a basis in the Hadith for female genital mutilation. They're taught that it has no basis.
But that's not the entirety of Islam, is it?
No, but...
And you know it isn't. It's a very respectable... it's one of the big three Abrahamic religions. You know that.
No, hang on. It has nothing to do with an Abrahamic religion. Do you know anything about Muhammad at all?
I do.
And okay, so you know he was having sex with a 9-year-old.
Well Emma, but Emma, if we go back thousands of years and look at our attitudes today to then, we don't get very far, do we?
Described as the best of all Muslims. I don't think it's appropriate for children to be taught that a man in his 50s having sex with a 9-year-old.
And do you think that's what's high on the list of the teachers when you're dealing about the religion?
But I think the parents that know about it don't want their children.
And what do we do? Do we then explain religion through the prism of Jesus must have been a sexist? He had no female apostles. What are we teaching this for? Why are we teaching them about Jesus?
You can examine Christianity. You can
examine all of them.
Yes, you can, and you can. And
That's all I'm saying.
Them. But the penalty for criticising Islam is death, and I wouldn't want that in my child's life. It's too dangerous. When in the 30s, when Hitler was in power, children from Nazi families didn't pray to God; they prayed to.
And Christianity still teaches that homosexuality is a sin.
And we're allowed to criticise that. In Islam,
it's still central to its teachings. You are allowed to criticise it.
No, you're not.
Yes, you are. We just do it every day of the week, Emma.
Well, yeah, but we don't live under Sharia, do we?
No, we don't. No, we don't. But imagine if a child didn't even know what that was in a conversation later on in their life. Would you like that for your child?
They don't teach any of those things. They don't teach any of the...
Of course they teach. I tell you what they should be teaching if they're teaching Islam in school is the sweep of Sharia law. It isn't just what we've seen in the worst parts of the world, the worst examples of it. It's far from that. And that's the kind of education I'm talking about. I'm not talking about saying this is a religion that supports paedophilia. No religion supports paedophilia. But Emma, I just disagree with you. I think you've gone in at the worst entrance possible into your interpretation of Islam in order to discredit Islam. And I just think it is one of the big monotheistic religions, and it has to be taught. You don't have to convert to it. You don't have to believe in it, but it has to be taught.
You're a leading expert on this. Why is the left allied with radical Islam? Why are they trying to flood?
Because they hate Christianity. They can't, I mean, you know, they deny absolutely our Judeo-Christian culture, which if you think about it, actually are the roots completely of our nations and our civilization. They deny that. They also, don't forget, Alex, they want to abolish the nation state. They want to get rid of it. They want to replace it with the globalist project, and the European Union is the prototype for the new world order. Do you know, if Hillary had won that election last year, she was going to sign America up to get really close to this kind of thing. So, you know, we may sit here right now, Alex, and be a bit critical of Trump, but on many other things, he's got things right. And when you send a message, when Angela Merkel sends a message, as many of you as want to come can come, what do you think they're going to do? In fact, the liberals have become the very fascists that they try and criticize with their rhetoric. And look, what's really happening here? You know, don't underestimate how massive the seismic shock of 2016 was. The victory of Brexit, the victory of Trump. You know, we're winning. Look at Hungary the other day. We are winning, but it doesn't feel like we're winning because the left and the state are fighting back with all their might. And you know something? If we can resist this politically correct charge, this attempt to stop us thinking and speaking freely, if we can resist that, then our victory actually will be complete. So don't get down, everybody. Don't get depressed. They're behaving like this because we're beating them.
Chris is in Dis. I like that. One day I'm going to do a show where everybody's name rhymes with the town that they're calling from. But for today, Chris in Dis, I think you're on your own. What would you like to say?
Yeah, good morning, James. I think the one thing that's changed is even less people believe this lie. We're relying on one Al-Qaeda-produced video as evidence for this attack. That is the rebels in the area, Al-Qaeda.
Right. You're a bit nuts, Chris, aren't you, mate?
A bit what, sorry?
Nuts.
Why do you think that, James? Explain to us all.
When President Macron talks about the tests that have been undertaken on the urine and blood samples from the victims of the gas attack that were brought out of Syria by the Red Cross and other humanitarian organisations, you think that's all lies, don't you?
No. I'm not denying for one moment that there's been some sort of attack.
But you think the rebels did it to themselves?
There are UN documents that prove that the other side have used chlorine gas.
Okay, so in answer to the question of why Theresa May is doing it, your answer is because. Go on again.
Well, Theresa May will do anything that's put in front of her.
Right.
Don't you think it's a bit coincidental, James?
No, I don't.
Don't you think it's a bit
coincidental? No, not even a little bit. So she'll do anything that's put in front of her. So if we put in front of her, don't do it, she'd do that as well, would she?
Of course she would.
So who's putting this in front of her then?
And you don't think it's a bit coincidental?
No, not even a tiny bit coincidental. But who's putting this in front of her then, do you think?
Don't you think it's a bit coincidental?
No, not even a tiny bit. So who's putting this in front of her? When you say she'll do whatever's put in front of her, who's putting it in front of her?
Coincidental?
No, I don't. I honestly don't think it's coincidental. But when you say she'll do whatever's put in front of her, who's put this in front of her?
Over me, won't you?
Who's put this in front of her?
Right, I'm going to try again.
Okay, well, let me know how you get on. Carl is in Woking. Hello, Carl.
Hello.
What would you like to say?
Just I'm sceptical of it being the Russians. For the last sort of 3-6 months, all we've had in the media has been kind of anti-Russian this and kind of sceptical this. And then it just seems very suspicious that Russia would try and assassinate another Russian who was a double agent for them, but they've used a nerve agent
who Vladimir Putin had already said he hoped to kick the bucket.
He did, absolutely, but they've used a nerve agent manufactured by Russia to do it, so it's tied straight back to them. So if I was going to be murdering someone, I wouldn't use a gun that was registered in my name. I'd go and use something completely different. It all just seems a little bit suspicious. And the whole fact that Macron's now saying he's also got evidence of the chemical attacks, we were told this with the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. It also seems a bit suspicious that Assad, who wouldn't want to annoy the West, would use chemical weapons, which has already been called a red mark by the West, on his own people in a town that is rebel-held. It seems more logical that the rebels would set off a chemical attack, so then they're able to garner more support from the rest of the world.
Well, we had that discussion yesterday, but let's stick to Salisbury for the moment. OK, if you don't think, or if you're suspicious about the allegations about Russia, who else would have a motive?
Any other country that wants the West to start having pops to Russia, realistically.
And how would they get this pure nerve agent?
It's not just Russia that manufactures it. So there's a couple
it is actually. I mean, I don't know if you've read this letter from the Secretary, from Mark Sedwill, the Prime Minister's National Security Advisor, to NATO today. They say they've got clear evidence that Russia has manufactured small stocks of this since 1990, and indeed, I think it says in the last few years. So it says, yeah, I've got the sentence here. It says within, hang on. Within the last decade, Russia has produced and stockpiled small quantities of Novichoks under the same programme.
What if they've had that stolen or have lost some and they managed to get that to another country who's then used it? It's going to tie straight back to Russia and put the blame straight back on them. It's all pointing to that, and I understand...
No, it isn't actually. Listen to the words carefully. Within the last decade, Russia has produced and stockpiled small quantities of Novichoks. That's not equivocal.
Doesn't mean it's them that's used it. Why would they use a weapon that can be tied?
Well, no one else manufactures it, do they? So where would they get it from?
In England, if they want to murder 2 people in England, why wouldn't they just go and ram the car off the road or shoot them or stab them or something like that that's not going to be tied back to an entire country? it'd be tied back.
But you're not answering the fact that this it was now clearly Novichok, which has been produced by Russia and nobody else in the world. So you haven't come up with any plausible reason for anybody else doing it.
Weren't able to link it back to a country, were they?
No, because they weren't asked to. They weren't asked to do that. They were asked to identify what it was.
Yeah, and they have said clearly that it's Novichok.
Yeah.
And we're not denying that Russia has made any.
Exactly.
Or that we're not denying that. What we're saying is, why would Russia use that to assassinate people in England?
Because they presumably thought that these two people would end up dead rather than actually having recovered.
But it would still be tied back. If they were suspicious deaths, it's more likely going to be investigated, and they'd still tie it back to the Novichok eventually. So it's still going to link.
Well, maybe they thought it. Maybe they thought it couldn't be detected. I've no idea.
But why would they take that risk of inflaming international tensions? They would just do it in a way that wouldn't tie back to any individual country.
But if you're going to doubt all of these massive, I mean, in your words, I suppose, massive coincidences, I mean, everything is pointing to Russia here, and yet you seem to think there's some conspiracy by everybody else to blame Russia when they aren't to blame, but you can't actually tell me who is to blame or even speculate about who is to blame.
There just seems a lot of it. For whatever reason, going back to trying to blame Russia for lots of things, whether it's interfering with elections or whatever else. And again, we're not saying they haven't.
So why do you give Russia a free pass on all of this?
Why would they want to be involved?
No, answer the question. Why is it that you're so willing to believe that Russia is sweet and innocent and has done no interference in elections? They've done nothing in Salisbury. They've done nothing in Syria. I don't understand the mentality. Well, you are saying that. You've just said it all right through this conversation.
I can't see why they would. What benefit?
That's not an answer. That's not an answer.
But what benefit are they going to gain from enraging the West against them? It's another Cold War for the sake of it, unless there's logic behind it. That's something that either I've not worked out or anyone else. It's all just a little bit.
So you dismiss all of these pieces of evidence that point towards Russia completely because you can't see why they would do it?
Not at all. Everything ties back to Russia. I'm not denying that it does. I'm just asking, why would they want to? What are they going to gain from doing all of that?
Well, who knows what goes on in the mind of Vladimir Putin, eh?
It blows me.
Carl, thank you. Let's go to Lynn in Easingwold in North Yorkshire. Hello, Lynn.
Hello, I'm terribly nervous.
Are you? I don't know why. I'm very nice.
You're so, formidable.
Am I? I don't regard myself as formidable at all, but there you go.
I tried to get through yesterday because I'm not up to speed with all the news today on Russia because I've been out. But I just wanted to put a point forward.
Go on.
Russia were being accused. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that they did or they didn't do it, but Russia, I think it's been handled so badly. They were accused right from the start before there was any evidence. There still isn't any evidence. There's still the OPCW have still not linked it to Russia.
No, because that's not their job.
When I listened, well, I think that's rather. How can I put it? Why wouldn't we want to, why don't we want to prove it's Russia? I don't understand that.
Well, obviously the government does want to prove that it's Russia, and Theresa May, if you remember, when she first stood up in the House of Commons, she said that we believe it's Russia because all of our intelligence points in that direction. They're the only ones that manufacture Novichok.
I don't think that's true. I think it's been manufactured.
With respect, Lynn, are we to believe the Prime Minister or you? I mean, what evidence have you got to suggest that Theresa May was not telling the truth?
I don't have any evidence to suggest that she wasn't telling the truth, but I don't think they knew. I don't think they knew right at the start that it was Russia. I think they were speculating. Don't you?
No, I absolutely don't, because I don't believe that Theresa May would have gone to the House of Commons and made the kind of statement she did had she not got intelligence evidence that linked it to Russia. Now, you can call me naive and that I shouldn't believe any politician, shouldn't believe a word they say, but and there are some politicians who I might not believe if they did that, but I think Theresa May is not the kind of politician that would go and tell a deliberate lie to the House of Commons, because she would know exactly what the consequences would be if she was found out not to be telling the truth. And ever since then, bear in mind this is now a month ago, ever since then, every event, everything that's happened, further points the finger at Russia. This letter that which you, if you've been out, you wouldn't have been able to read, but just search for it on the internet. It's very easy. It's from Sir Mark Sedwill, the National Security Advisor, a letter to Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of NATO, and he details in quite a lot of detail all the allegations against Russia, including the fact that the OPCW have verified what the British government was saying all along, that it is Novichok that was used.
Can I just say, yesterday, the reason I phoned up yesterday was because I was surprised at all the headlines in the papers, because it said that the OPCW had confirmed the government. It was suggesting that the OPCW had confirmed that it was was Russia, but they didn't.
No, they didn't. They confirmed that it was Novichok, and that everything the British government had said about this nerve agent was true.
Well, they didn't say that everything the government said about the nerve agent was true.
They absolutely said that.
They said it was a Novichok type agent,
and it was pure and had not been interfered with, and it was military grade, and it could only have been used by a state. That's what they said.
I wonder if you could find out in your, because you probably have better access to information than me, because I thought it was deadly. It's supposed to be the most deadly substance, and I don't understand how they've survived.
Well, I think most people thought they wouldn't survive, but it turns out that it was applied to the door handle of the house of Mr. Skripal. Now, it could be that when he went to open the door, he didn't grip the handle tightly. I've got no idea. I don't know how this works.
You see, the other thing, I mean, I tended to agree with what the other chap was saying as well. I'm sort of thinking, if it's something that could only be linked back to Russia, why would they use it? I don't.
Well, to get rid of somebody that they regard as somebody that they don't want to continue living. Vladimir Putin said he hoped that all traitors to Russia would kick the bucket, and that presumably included Mr. Skripal. Lynn, thank you very much. So what do you think of these latest developments today? This letter from the National Security Advisor to Theresa May, Sir Mark Sedwill, to Jens Stoltenberg at NATO, making very clear what the United Kingdom's allegations are. Two bits of new information: that Yulia Skripal's emails had been hacked into for 5 years, according to this letter, by the Russians, and also that Russia has produced and stockpiled small quantities of Novichoks over the last few years, and also that they had trialled using it on door handles. Now, added together with what we already know, I mean, it's starting to look quite conclusive, isn't it? But not, of course, if you listen to our first few callers on the programme. Paul is in Hayes. Hello, Paul.
Hello.
Hi, what would you like to say?
I'm another sceptic, unfortunately. I don't think that we're being told the whole story.
I agree with you, and I don't think we should be. I don't believe the Prime Minister should reveal items of national security to the general public. You can't be 100% open on these things. I mean, hopefully at some stage they can be, but not while the investigation's going on.
You don't have to be 100% certain to see these huge holes in some of the stuff that's being said.
What holes?
Well, let me finish. One of them is that Russia's the only people who can use this Novichok. Apparently, it was first synthesized and used in Iran. So there goes that theory. Yeah, it was so Middle East have the ability to be able to synthesize and use this nerve agent.
And why would they want to kill the Skripals if it was a Middle Eastern country?
Like I said, I haven't got the answer to everything.
No, you clearly haven't.
No, but I'm still pointing holes in what you said earlier. Russia is not the only one that has the ability.
Well, I have to say, I don't know where you've got that from about Iran. I haven't heard that one, I have to say.
Okay, well, maybe you should look it up.
Well, where did you get it from?
Well, I got it from somebody who knows about these things.
Oh, right, okay.
But here is something else that was worrying me, yeah? Now, apparently, it was spared on the door handle, and they got the biggest concentration of Novichok. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, they were wandering around for a good couple of hours, and apparently nobody else got ill, and they must have bought stuff, they must have handled stuff. Nobody else got ill. Yet a policeman who came to help them, He got ill immediately, not after 4 or 5 hours.
Well, because he was presumably in very close proximity to them.
Yeah, but they didn't get ill immediately. So, and if they've got the biggest concentration of it and they get ill immediately, then how could he get ill immediately?
Well, I think the lady from Yorkshire that phoned in explained that one, and when she said that if it's ingested or injected, you do die immediately, but if it's on your skin, there's a delay in it. Look, I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert on that, but it sounded a far more credible explanation than yours, Paul. Thank you. I also want to talk about the news that broke about, 4 o'clock, just as we went on air, that the Russians are directly accusing Britain of staging and directing the chemical weapons attack in Duma. Nathan's embarking. Hello, Nathan.
Hello there. How are you? You all right?
Very well. What would you like to say?
Yes, I think there's an element to this that I think is being kind of left out of the picture in the conversation, which is the influence of the military-industrial complex, which stands to gain. Because I think one of the first casualty of war, as we know, is truth. And I think if we don't step back for a moment, because you can get kind of into this like rolling feeling of, well, what we're going to do, and lose clarity. I think you need to gain some perspective, and step back and say, who really stands to gain from further escalation and further action? And I think the first thing you have to look at really is the military-industrial complex, which benefits massively. There's huge profit from war, and no one seems to talk about it. Well, I don't really hear many people discussing the financial incentive of war. And it's
what you mean? Sort of, if we, last year Donald Trump, I think, used 60 cruise missiles to attack Syria, so those had to be replenished from, but presumably buying them from manufacturers. So therefore, you mean that people are profiting from the dropping of bombs?
Absolutely, and when you follow the trail and you do a little bit of investigation, you will see that where are these weapons manufactured in the biggest, the biggest way, and it's out of the US, it's out of the West. We do supply the weapons, and it's been people have been caught, so-called rebels have been caught.
But if you obviously if you're going to use bombs, then they have to be replenished from somewhere. So of course you have to purchase them.
I agree, but then you have to ask yourself, so there are lobbyists who push for war, you see, so therefore they have an agenda that is outside of our remit. We're thinking of this in kind of more political sense, not a financial sense. That's the first thing. And I think one of the cases for this, a very strong piece of evidence, is if you search online for General Wesley Clark, who was a very...
I've met him.
General. Okay,
now there's a conspiracy for you, Nathan. I've actually met Wesley Clark.
Okay, well, if you watch his video online where he talks about, and this was in 2011, he talks about the plan for 7 countries in 5 years, he said then, and these countries were listed long before Syria was in the headlines. Syria was a secular country, peaceful, relatively peaceful for the middle, for a country in the Middle East where people could practice any religion. He's a Christian, but the Syria was on the list. So this is a very long in the plans, So, and here we are talking about it as if it's happening now. There are people who have been planning this for a very long time.
I'll go so far as to say, when I did meet Wesley Clark, I found him a very sinister man. I didn't like him at all, I have to say. However, I can't quite see the jump from him to what's happening in Syria, because this is essentially it started off as just a normal civil war. It wasn't really part of...
Can I interrupt there? Sorry.
Go on.
So we were told that it was a civil war, but we have a long history. Again, people seem to just not want to look into history. In 1953, the US, the CIA, has now completely admitted this, that with the British caused a coup in Iran to get rid of a democratically elected leader, Mossadegh, and install a dictator, the Shah, who was an Islamic extremist, because he was a puppet that would do it as he was told. So we have a long history, and that's just one example of many. I mean, we can go through.
Yeah, but just because there was one example, you say there are many. That does not automatically mean that America itself was behind starting the civil war in Syria, does it?
So this goes back to the question of why do people have doubts? Why have people lost faith? Well, I think it's absolutely apparent because there is a modus operandi here. There is a system that has has been repeating its tactics time and time and time again. If you have a repeated offender and that guy does, he's innocent until proven guilty. But we can't. I mean, can you point to the last time that Russia intervened they tried to say they intervened in the presidential election of the US. That's a whole other subject. But what precedent have they set where they interfere in foreign elections and do this?
Where do I start? But I mean, just mention Georgia and Ukraine as two.
Again, Georgia and Ukraine. So the US were installing weapons in Ukraine on the doorstep of Russia.
Well, listen.
If our so-called fellow superpowers started building missiles right on the border of Britain, surely we're going to start getting a bit worried. So,
well, as soon as I said that, I regretted it, because we could have another 10-minute conversation on that. But Nathan, I hope you feel I've given you a good shout, because I've gone way over when I should go to the news. So I enjoyed that. Thank you very much.
This is LBC.
5:38, back to your calls on Syria. Steve is in Rickmansworth. Hello, Steve.
Hi there, Iain. No, I agree with... I think what you said about the two recent gas attacks, you're probably right. I mean, I think the Russians did it, and I think the Assad government did what they did. But the trouble is, you ask the question why people keep phoning you up and saying, all these conspiracy theories and stuff, and everyone says Iraq. Well, for me, it's not Iraq. It's not Iraq. It's Dunblane. It's Jimmy Savile and his friends. It's the BBC, and it's all of that I want to... We can still cure that. We can get our own act straight before we try and butt our noses in other people's.
I'm probably going to regret asking this question, Steve, but what on earth...
I know a lot of stuff.
No.
I can never tell you.
What has Dunblane got to do with the price of fish?
The cover-up, 100-year cover-up on information to start with, and all the important people involved. That's the truth. I mean, I can't say what I want to say.
Are we talking about the same thing? Are we talking about the shooting?
Yes. 22
happened there. There's no conspiracy there, surely.
I think you need to research it. I can't say on the radio because you just turn me off. So, but suffice to say, the man involved, Hamilton, was having,
All right, I think I'm already regretting going down this rabbit hole, to be honest.
And that's what I'm saying to you. That's why I can't say anything. That's why we can't. And that's why people get into conspiracy theories. Most of it is wrong. A lot of it is right. And that's the problem. We don't trust politicians. I mean, we're talking about Cyril Smith at the moment now.
But accusing people of things where there are no facts. I mean that.
There's facts, Iain. There's facts, Iain. There's facts. There's cover-ups. They talked today recently on the radio, this radio station itself, about Cyril Smith and the fact the police knew about it in the 1960s. Untouched man with his mates in Westminster, Dolphin Square. This is what's going on. You need to get people on the radio that will tell the truth about so-called conspiracy theories. People like Bill Maloney and Chris Fay. These are the people you need to speak to, and they can go as far as they can go. But there's a lot that's gone on. It's been kept secret, and that's why when we have a gas attack every fortnight, or so it seems, we kind of think, well, what's going on? It probably is true what you think about Syria and Russia. I get that. I can't understand for any reason why they would want to do it, but I kind of get it. I kind of get it's probably right. But I don't know anything about what you're saying about Dunblane, but I do understand your general point about when people find where things have been suspected and not looked into, and that the establishment has sort of closed ranks. And I think that undoubtedly happened in the Cyril Smith case. We can see that as clearly as our noses are in front of our faces. However, you say about Dolphin Square, well, as far as I can see, nothing has been proved there at all. And we know a lot of these things that come out. This Nick that we all hear about, we have to be careful what we say there, because I think I don't think he's been charged with anything, but he's clearly not told the truth to people, and at the very least. So
and I understand that when we have the internet, all sorts of weird and wonderful theories are promulgated, some of which may be true and some of which may not be true. And we all have to sort of weave our way through the undergrowth of the internet to try and work out what is true and not true. But often, you know, it's not a conspiracy. And we mustn't assume that everything in public life revolves around a conspiracy. Anyway, Steve, thank you. George is in Croydon. Hi, George.
Hi, Ian. Yeah, I don't think this crisis has got anything much to do with Syria or chemical weapons or anything. It's about...
Apart from being chemical weapons in Syria?
Well, no, but that's not what people really care about. It's about the fact that NATO has been proved impotent in the Middle East and in the theatre where they're active, and they don't see much point in themselves. And the people behind NATO find this reality unacceptable.
Who are the people behind NATO?
Well, the whole Western Empire. You know, we're all one group, aren't we?
Are we?
Well, don't you see that USA and EU and the UK and actually Israel, we're all just one unit? I mean, most.
No, I don't see that. But by the way, just as a point of information, Israel's not a member of NATO.
Well, yeah, but it's part of the political grouping that.
No, it's not.
Well, okay, if you say so. Yeah.
Well, it isn't. It's not part of NATO. Yes, Israel is an ally of the United Kingdom. It's an ally of the United States. But, I mean, I'm not quite sure where you're heading. Well, in fact, I probably am sure where you're heading with this, but go ahead anyway.
Well, that's what I'm saying is that that's what this is really about. I mean, the idea that we, that the West actually cares about dead Syrians is just comical, since we've backed all these Al Qaeda people to attack the Syrian government, and there's been tens and hundreds of thousands of deaths. I mean, it's horribly comical, but it is. We don't care about the dead Middle Eastern people. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been in there doing what we've been doing for the last 20 years. You know, and so this is about big global power politics. It's not about human suffering and humanitarianism, as these things are always sold.
So this sort of military-industrial complex that we heard from one of our previous callers about, it's all about that. It's all about them controlling Donald Trump, controlling Theresa May. That's what it's all about, is it?
It's about It's about that big picture, yes. Whatever that is.
Okay, George, thank you very much. Well, I'll leave people to draw their own conclusions. The trouble is, and you see, there are some times when I think, I mean, we've taken quite a lot of calls along those lines today, and there's part of me sometimes think, should we even be putting these people on air? But we believe in free speech, I guess, so that's why we do it. Tay is in Harpenden. Hello, Tay.
Hello.
What would you like to say?
I'd like to really express how disappointed I am with the UK. I'm a British citizen. I study law, and I'm appalled that we, as a country, can accuse another country without any form of evidence.
Without any form of evidence? Without any form of evidence?
What evidence have you got? Because you keep declaring that you're in support of Theresa May attacking Syria to get rid of Assad.
Well, are we talking about Syria here or Salisbury?
Sorry, I'm talking about both, actually, but we'll go with Syria first. I just cannot believe that I'm paying thousands for a law degree, which everything that's being done and carried out by our nation it defeats the whole object of me studying this degree. Now,
what about Assad, who has repeatedly broken international law in the past by using chemical weapons?
And what proof is there to support that allegation?
Oh dear, it's like Groundhog Day, isn't it?
No, it's not Groundhog Day.
It is, because people say this every day, and I explain.
To be investigated, but we have all of a sudden come out and investigated the Scruples being attacked by a chemical substance. But when the house was cordoned off and the pets died, the police that were outside the property had no protective clothing on or anything. All the media that's coming out of the supposed attack...
Who are these people that I saw wearing protective clothing, then?
They were not wearing protective clothing.
Well, I saw them wearing protective clothing.
I never saw them, and
well,
they're outside the front door. Well, maybe we saw two different things.
I thought we were talking about Syria.
Well, I will go on to Syria, because it does link in. Now, at the end of the day, we're accusing Russia of support. Well, Russia they support Assad. That's their ally. Now, making an accusation, Russia and Syria are prepared to allow investigators to come in.
No, they weren't.
They are. They've stated that they're prepared to allow the UN to come in and investigate the area.
No, the Americans put down a proposal at the UN to do exactly that, using independent observers, and the Russians vetoed it. The OPCW are going in tomorrow. You're right in that.
They're going in, but
Yeah.
we won't allow Russia to investigate the scruples over here. We've had no confirmation.
Why would you let the arsonist investigate the arson?
But how would you not? If we are meant to be a democratic state. So therefore, I study law, and if an allegation is made, a full investigation has to be conducted.
and we've had the OPCW in. Hang on, we've had the we've had the OPCW investigate it.
Hold on a minute. Why are we not allowing Russia to come in and investigate? Why? Just tell me why. If we're so right,
Isn't it bleeding obvious? Isn't it bleeding obvious?
No, it's not obvious.
Would you let a suspect? Hang on. Forget. Look, Hillsborough's got absolutely nothing to do with this at all. Hillsborough's got nothing to do with this at all. Would you let? Look, Tay, will you? If we can have a conversation, try and listen to what I'm saying, and then you can respond to it.
Right.
If you are a lawyer, you will know that you do not let the suspect investigate the crime.
It's not, but the suspect has to have representation, exactly how we have.
And they have that through the OPCW.
But they have not allowed them in.
We have allowed the OPCW in, for goodness sake. What do you think they were doing in Salisbury? The report was issued this week.
They were not allowed. Oh, come on. Why is the whole world and the whole nation against it? Why do we not believe? I don't believe.
Well, I'll tell you what. If you're a potential lawyer, I pity your clients. Dear, oh dear, oh dear. We're going to move away from this now. Some of you think, thank goodness, and I'm probably one of them.